Hello viewers and welcome to yet another live action commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present yet another game featuring Sebastian Freiding. Sitting to our left, playing as the Astra Militarum faction Warlord Colonel Straken, and on the right we have Alexander Cimadon, playing as the second Dark Eldar faction Warlord Urien Rakarth. Alexander holds our initiative token. We can see that his opening deploy action is going to be a copy of his signature support, Urien's Oubliette. So immediately evident is that the Colonel Straken player has to play with the top card of his deck revealed, and as an action, Alexander can have either both players draw one card or discard the top card of their deck, dependent upon what he sees sitting atop his opponent's deck. On Colonel Straken's side of the table, we have a copy of the ever-popular limited card, the Prometheum Mine, a support. It enters play with 4 resource tokens placed upon it, and at the onset of your deploy phase, you add one of those to your pool of resource tokens. And the signature cards keep coming. To the right, we've got a copy of the signature attachment, the incredibly powerful Ichor Gauntlet. You affix it to Urien Rakarth, and anytime you play a torture event, you can simply exhaust Urien, and then you can basically replicate the effects of that event. So a Visions of Agony, you discard 2 cards. Power from Pain, your opponent sacrifices 2 units. Incredibly powerful indeed, and I'm sure being played out so early, that could make a tremendous difference over the course of this game here. But to the left, we see a copy of the signature support, the Omega Zero Command. So fascinating that both of our players are seeing so many powerful cards so early, but every time until the end of the game that Colonel Straken happens to win a command struggle, he's going to be able to put a guardsman token into play at that planet, and that's going to be a 1/2 soldier trait token. And when Colonel Straken is present at a planet, any and all soldier or warrior trait units Sebastian controls are going to be getting a +1 attack value boost, and that's going to include each and every one of those tokens. But we also happen to see a copy of Catachan Outpost sitting in Straken's HQ. As a combat action, you exhaust it. You give any of your units a +2 attack boost, which persists only for that unit's next 1 attack. And we happen to see a Rattling Deadeye at planet number 1. That's going to be a 1/1 ranged unit with a command icon played out by our Colonel Straken player. And it's going to be opposite another signature unit. It's the Twisted Rax. That's one of 2 cards in Alexander's deck, or one of 2 copies of that card in his deck. It's a cost of 2, no command icons whatsoever. Definitely a big community complaint regarding Urien is that overall lack of command icon value anywhere, but it's a 3/3, and at any point you can simply discard a torture trait card from hand in order to ready it, and should it have the opportunity to pummel your enemy's warlord into oblivion, that is an absolutely fantastic means with which to do so. Like if your enemy warlord is exhausted, you can attack, discard a card, attack. We've got a copy of Mystic Warden at planet number 2. It's a 2/2 that you sacrifice at the end of a combat. We've also got a Rogue Trader sitting at planet number 2. Urien was sent to planet number 2, and Straken instead was sent to planet number 5, where sits a Void Pirate under the control of Alexander there. So planet number 1 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource, 1 by Colonel Straken. Note that he generated a Guardsman token. Planet number 2 is going to be a card and 2 resources for Alexander. Planet number 5 is going to be a card and a resource for Colonel Straken, and once again, note that that is 2 Guardsman tokens already being generated, all for the cost of 2 resources and a card, and by no means is this match over yet. So, planet number 1 and planet number 5, we're going to see battles. Planet number 1 is going to be Taurus, which rewards you with either 3 cards or 3 resources if you happen to have a lower unit count than does your opponent. And let's count units real quick. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, controlled by Sebastian, and instead it's a paltry 4 controlled by our Dark Eldar player. But the problem is, if he kills off 2 units in order to win the battle at planet number 1, then he's going to be putting our AM player's unit count lower than that of his, and he's not going to be able to actually win Taurus's ability, or he can't activate it. But Catachan Outpost is exhausted. That Rattling Deadeye is going to be able to potentially attack for 3, which would outright kill off that copy of the Twisted Rax. We happen to see a copy of Searing Brand discarded at the same planet where resides your Warlord. Normally that lets you deal 3 unpreventable damage to an enemy unit, unless its controller decides to discard 2 cards from hand, and given the presence of that Ichor Gauntlet, that is an absolutely fantastic thing, to replicate. But in any case, the Twisted Rax are going to survive that combat with 1 point of damage. They're going to take a swing in return. And what exactly are we going to see? That's going to be a copy of Glorious Intervention, so I can only imagine that that is going to be preventing that damage dealt to the Guardsman token. Normally you have to sacrifice a warrior or soldier trait unit, and it looks as though Sebastian actually had the target of that event slightly mistaken. So the way that it works is you prevent an attack, and in doing so have to sacrifice a soldier or warrior trait unit. So he had to get rid of that Guardsman token to preserve the life of the Rattling Deadeye, so it's going to be able to basically retreat at the end of the round. I can't imagine it's going to stick around. There's no additional Catachan Outpost in play with which it could potentially threaten to kill off that copy of the Twisted Rax. So the Rattling Deadeye indeed does retreat. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 units in play for our Dark Eldar player. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 units in play for our Astra Militarum player. So even though Cimadon happened to win Taurus, he is unable to trigger its battle ability, and I happen to overlook the presence of Urien Rakarth sitting at planet number 2, but that's going to be a Urien taking a swing at the Mystic Warden. We see a copy of Honorifica Imperialis discarded. That's a 2-cost attachment that you affix to an army unit, and it happens to gain ranged and armor bane in the presence of an enemy warlord. So Urien does not manage to kill off that enemy unit. That's going to be, I believe it was a rogue trader sitting at that planet that is going to be killed off by the Mystic Warden. And we're going to see the end of a combat round. Note that Alexander's got the initiative at that planet, and it looks as though we're actually going to see Urien take a second swing. Neither player retreats. That's going to be another copy of the Honorifica Imperialis discarded as shields to keep that Mystic Warden in play. What's pretty fantastic is you can work around that has to, be sacrificed at the end of a battle ability, in that if it retreats, it's not going to be present at a planet when a battle concludes, and therefore it need not be sacrificed. It can live again to fight another day. But in any case, looks as though we see a copy of Visions of Agony played, so that's going to be Alexander getting to pick one of those cards from the Astra Militarum faction player's hand to discard, and it looks as though we get rid of that copy of Glorious Intervention, the signature event, the second copy of that signature event, the only other one in his deck, and then Urien takes a swing and ends up finally killing off that copy of the Mystic Warden. So we did not see Visions of Agony doubled, but that is going to be an opportunity for our Dark Eldar player to know full well what exactly is in Sebastian's hands. So looks as though we have another battle won by Urien, therefore Planum, planet number 2, is going to be activated. The Twisted Rax is now going to be positioned at planet number 3. Colonel Straken is going to have an opportunity sitting atop planet number 5 to not just take a swing at that Void Pirate, but he'll also be able to trigger Aatrox Prime, targeting the Dark Eldar player's HQ, and then Urien is going to end up taking a point of damage through Aatrox Prime there. So Aatrox Prime is going to fire at Alexander's HQ now that that Void Pirate is dead, and that's going to be our Dark Eldar Warlord with 3 total points of damage. So very interesting to note, our current planet number 1, as soon as we see the onset of our HQ phase, is going to be Planum, the Move a Non-Warlord unit planet. Planet number 2 is going to be Farron, the Rout, a non-warlord unit planet. Planet number 3 is going to be Karnath, which allows you the ability to trigger the planetary battle ability of any other planet in play. And our planet number 4 is going to be Aatrox Prime, with our new planet number 5 being Ossus 4, so that's going to be the Steel 1 resource planet. Note that we can still see abundantly clearly the cards sitting atop Colonel Straken's deck, and as command struggles are resolved one at a time, basically, seeing as how Straken's only got one card in hand, well, he just drew 2 cards, but Urien's Oubliette on the first turn is going to provide an incredible amount of information, and unless Colonel Straken happens to draw multiple cards all at once, like, let's see, we don't have any planets in play right now that have a 2-card bonus, but if he's just drawing 1 card at a time, 1 command struggle at a time, then Alexander is going to know every single card that enters Sebastian's hand, although during the HQ phase just now, he of course drew those 2 cards as if they were 1, and therefore we only saw that, I believe it was Muster the Guard entering his hand there, but we've got a copy of the signature army unit for Straken, the Straken's command squad being put into play at planet number 1. That's got a green strong point icon that could potentially fuel a victory condition for Alexander, but in assessing our planetary layouts, if Alexander wants to win through green strong point icons, he wouldn't end up winning the game until our current planet number 5, and instead if he opts for red material type icons, he could do so at planet number 3. But in any case, Straken's command squad, when it ends up leaving play from a planet, you can put a guardsman token into play, which is a 1/2 soldier token, and that, with that Omega Zero command, could just absolutely flood the board with those tokens. So we've got a copy of Void Pirate now touching down on planet number 5, played out by Urien Rakarth. And let's see what exactly we've got here. That Prometheum Mine is normally pretty frowned upon as a card nowadays. Note that this is a little bit older video, but at the time of its release, the entire Warlord cycle is indeed available, as evidenced by Urien Rakarth sitting out there. He was released during our 6th and final war pack of the Warlord cycle, Descendants of Isha. So, you know, Prometheum Mine, not something you see every day, but on the first turn, it could ultimately end up generating 4 resources for you, albeit at the cost of 1 card, and the resource you spent to play it. Urien's Oubliette is activated. That's going to be a copy of 2 arms discarded from the top of our Astra Militarum faction player's deck. That's a 2 shield card, and it allows him to ready a support, something along the lines of that Catachan outpost, and if memory serves, it costs 0 resources, so Cimadon's discard pile is ever so slightly out of view. We can't actually tell what Urien ended up discarding himself, but we've now got an Engine Seer Augur positioned at planet number 1. It does not happen to be a soldier or warrior, so it's not going to be able to benefit from Colonel Straken's ability. Note that that whole to-do with the Glorious Intervention happened to be because the Rattling Deadeye itself is a scout and abhuman. It's not actually a soldier or warrior, so it's not eligible to be sacrificed by Glorious Intervention. But no matter the case, Urien's Oubliette forced both players to discard a card. We'll have to forever live not knowing what exactly Cimadon discarded, but we've now got a copy of Hellion Gang positioned at planet number 3. That's going to be a 2/2 flyer, so if all you can do is attack it with a 2-value unit, 2 cut in half is only going to be 1, and therefore it can survive quite a bit more damage than could equivalently cost units. But looks like Colonel Straken's going to show up at planet number 2, Urien Rakarth is going to show up at planet number 4, and we're going to see 1 card, 1 resource, 1 at planet number 1 by Straken. He also generates a guardsman token. Planet number 2 is going to be Colonel Straken's destination. He's going to win 2 resources and generate a guardsman token at that planet. The Twisted Rax doesn't have any command icons at all, so even if it were all by its lonesome, it would not win any command struggles. But planet number 3 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource for Cimadon. Planet number 4 is going to be a card and a resource for Cimadon. Planet number 5 is going to be a card and 2 resources for Alexander. And note, whenever, you draw a card one at a time, that's going to be Urien's Oubliette, giving all of that information to Cimadon. He knows full well that his opponent drew another dangerous copy of the deadly Prometheum Mine. For all I know, miners could be trapped down there and it could collapse, and that would just be an absolute nightmare for Colonel Straken, but he's got another copy of 2 arms sitting atop his library at the moment. That means he's going to be drawing that in 1 additional card during our HQ phase, but this round we're going to see battles take place at planet number 1, 2, and 4. We're going to see planet number 1, it looks as though, won quite handily by Colonel Straken there. I believe that guardsman token, unless there somehow got a token swept up into Straken's HQ, either Straken erroneously did not create a token at planet number 2, or he simply put one into play readied, but in any case, planet number 1 is going to be 1. That's going to be the Engine Seer Augur relocated thanks to Planum's planetary ability to planet number 4, where resides Urien Rakarth, and now we're going to see Colonel Straken doing a bit of fighting at planet number 2. So if our Dark Eldar player could somehow manage it, that could be a ton of outgoing damage dealt by those Twisted Racks, which I say as they're in the process of being outright destroyed by Colonel Straken. If Straken were alone, that could have easily resulted in that Warlord being bloodied. We saw both copies of Glorious Intervention gone. We've started to see some 2 shield icon cards gone in the form of 2 Honorifica Imperialis and a 2 arms. So definitely Colonel Straken is going to be in a prime spot to end up being bloodied at some point. Granted, Urien isn't the highest damage output Warlord that the Dark Eldar have to offer of their, soon to be 3 present options, but in any case, whether or not Colonel Straken is safe, he's lost a hell of a lot of cards thus far. And next turn, he's going to have that Rattling Deadeye nicely positioned at a soon-to-be planet number 1, which it'll be ready going into the range skirmish round. We've seen a Catachan outpost activated at some point. Looks as though Urien used his opportunity to take a swing at that Engine Seer Augur, but a copy of Muster the Guard prevented that unit from being outright killed. I believe Colonel Straken used Catachan outpost to make sure that that Twisted Rax was destroyed. So Urien was unable to successfully kill that copy of Engine Seer Augur, but the Engine Seer Augur itself wasn't able to deal really any damage to Urien thanks to the discard of that Searing Brand. That's yet another torture trait card filling the discard pile of Colonel Straken. And that's going to be Aatrox Prime won by Urien, so Aatrox Prime is going to fire at our Astra Militarum faction player's HQ, and that's going to be a point of damage dealt out to each of those units. So the Engine Seer Augur is dead. Colonel Straken's got a point of damage. That's going to be 1 point of damage onto the Straken's command squad and that Guardsman token. And now we go to an HQ phase. Our new 5th planet is going to be Iridial, the healing planet. So our initiative token is now in the possession of Colonel Straken. And we've still got some cards left to ready. That Catachan Outpost, Colonel Straken himself, Urien's Oubliette, and we've got to reveal the top card of our AM player's deck. I'll be curious to see what exactly he's got at his disposal, and unless I'm gravely mistaken, he's now got a copy of 2 arms in his hand, which he could use to fantastic effect in just getting a monumental amount of value from that Catachan Outpost. So when the Engine Seer Augur is killed, you get to take a look at the top 6 cards of your deck for an Astra Militarum faction support, cost 2 or lower, or put it into play, and I imagine we saw some cards being put on the bottom of our AM player's deck. He must have whiffed. He must not have found a Catachan Outpost or Staging Ground or any eligible thing else to be put into play, but we've now got a copy of Interrogator Acolyte sitting atop his deck. He ended up drawing a card, I guess, for some reason. There was a copy of Blood Angels Veterans at the top of his deck just a moment ago. Perhaps he had that left over from his HQ phase. But in any case, we've now got a copy of Twisted Racks positioned at the 1st planet. That's going to be the 2nd and only other copy of that signature army unit played out by Urien, so he'd better get some use out of it. He's got the initiative token, but his opponent's going to be able to use that copy of Catachan Outpost to attack potentially for 3 and kill off that Twisted Racks. He could also use the 2 arms to make it all but a certainty that he'd be able to do that. And then if he wins at that planet, he'll be able to use Farron to rout whatever unit he would like. Note that we've now got a copy of the Blood Angels Veterans, a 3/3 for 3 with a command icon positioned at Aatrox Prime. There's now an Incubus Warrior, a 3/1 with 2 command icons positioned so that its command icons manage to best that Space Marine faction unit that ignores 1 point of damage when it happens to be ready and assign damage, and we've now got a copy of the 1 command icon, 3 cost, 2 attack, 2 hit point Interrogator Acolyte played out to planet number 2. When that leaves play, its controller draws 2 cards, and it's going to be opposite a copy of Chaos Fanatic, so it looks as though Urien is at least managing to starve his opponent economically reasonably well, really getting a lot of value out of each and every command icons. You know, your opponent puts down 1 command icon, so Alexander responds by putting a 2 command icon unit into play, and that's going to be of just just pinnacle importance that he does manage to do that, because Omega Zero Command is going to be, sitting there in play for the entire game. Each and every time that Straken wins a command struggle, that's going to be an additional guardsman token. That, alongside Straken, could be attacking for 2, and Urien, not the most durable warlord. Urien's already got 3 points of damage on him, and all of that could result in just a whole hell of a lot of dead Urien there, and it looks as though Urien happened to have a copy of that Hellion Gang now in his HQ. I suppose at some point Farron must have resulted in the routing of that unit. And what exactly are we going to see in regard to command phase committances? Straken is going to show up at planet number 1, Urien is going to show up at planet number 2. So we've got a red and a green icon for Alexander, we've got a blue and a green icon for Cimadon, so it looks as though no player has a victory coming too close, but that promotion on the Twisted Racks would have helped win command, but alas, Straken shows up, he generates another guardsman token because he wins a total of 2 resources at that planet. Note that pile of guardsman token forming at planet number 1, a whopping 3 already in play, and it looks as though Straken is doing that first planet bullying strategy, but planet number 2 is where Urien showed up. He is going to be able to win command at that planet. That's going to be a card, it's going to be a resource. Planet number 3, also going to be a card and a resource for our Dark Eldar faction Warlord, and planet number 4 is going to be a card and a resource for Dirty Urien Rakarth there. But we're going to see a battle erupt at planet number 1 and planet number 2. Straken is not in possession of our initiative token, but that matters not, because Commander Straken himself is going to commandeer the initiative. That Catachan outpost is currently exhausted, so I can only imagine that's going to be an outgoing attack valued at 3. Facing down that copy of Twisted Racks. Something interesting to note, I guess the Twisted Racks are going to be killed by that, so that will be Farron 1, and are we going to see the Chaos Fanatics or the Hellion Gang or Incubus Warrior? What are we going to see routed? It's going to be that copy of the Incubus Warrior, so that's going to be a red material type icon 1 and another planet added to Colonel Straken's victory display. So Straken has got a whole hell of a lot of different units that are all starting to accumulate in his HQ. He's going to be a very reasonable first planet bully as a result, and if he goes to our, second planet, third planet, if he wins the next 2 planets in line, he'll be able to beat Urien Rakarth. Something interesting to note about the Ichor Gauntlet there is if Urien ever happens to be at a planet by himself, there's an action window prior to your ability to take a combat turn, so if he doesn't have any opposition, you can play a torture event, you can exhaust him, thanks to the Ichor Gauntlet, to replicate its effects, then the combat round ends, then Urien is going to ready, and then he'll have another action window in which you can play a torture event, he can replicate its effects, and so on and so forth. And we've got 4 copies of the signature event, Rakarth's Experimentations in that deck, in which you name a card type, and if your opponent cannot discard a card of that type, you're going to be forced to deal 1 point of damage to the enemy warlord, so that could come back and punish Straken in a big way if Urien's sitting alone at a planet, and then just, maybe after a Visions of Agony, when Alexander knows exactly what the contents of his opponent's hand he could call out something like support, and then that would be a point of damage and another point of damage, because each and every copy of the signature event is going to be replicated. That could easily serve to either bloody the enemy warlord quite quickly, it could even kill the enemy warlord if he ends up being bloodied at some point, and, unless Straken has just a handful of shield cards to discard, that could end up working out pretty favorably for Cimadon there, but we've by now got a second copy of Prometheum Mine now clogging up a very full HQ for our AM player, and that is one hell of a full playmat on the left side of the table, but we finally see a little bit of a combat action taking place. That's going to be Urien Rakarth taking a swing, and it is going to be a hit. That's going to be a dead copy of the Interrogator Acolyte. Note that it results in him drawing 2 cards, so only one of those 2 cards is going to be known by the opposition. That's going to be another copy of Glorious Intervention, and I could only, I could have sworn we've already seen 2 copies of that card, so maybe that was some kind of erroneous deck inclusion, or somehow it, found its way back into the deck. But in any case, it seems as though that mistake is compensated by some sort of timely discard. And as Urien's Oubliette is exhausted, it seems like it has been doing some kind of discard work. But of course, since Cimadon's discard pile is slightly out of view, it's a bit difficult to tell when exactly that support is being activated here. So Karnath, that battle ability is 1, and based on the addition of dead units to the discard pile of Straken, I can only imagine that is Sebastian's HQ being bombarded by an activation of Aatrox Prime. So that's a dead Guardsman token. It's going to be a dead Rattling Deadeye. I believe it's also going to be a dead copy of Straken's command squad, and if it dies in an HQ, that means it's not going to have a planet that it's sitting at to spawn a token, and that's going to be Straken with 2 points of damage, and those Guardsman tokens are both quite clearly wounded, so my apologies in advance for a little bit of fair few oversights here and there, but there are certainly a hell of a lot of card interactions going on in this video, and it looks as though there are a few minor slip-ups by our players as well, but it's all good. We've got an HQ phase that is by now gone. That's 2 cards and 4 resources for both of our players. Those copies of Prometheum Mines continue to add resources to the gigantic resource pool of our Astra Militarum player. Looks like we do a little bit of damage token cleanup. And wow, I guess if I thought that our AM player had a big pile of resource tokens, take a look at the right side of the table. Urien has not been playing much, but what he does do is pay 2 to get a copy of Visions of Agony on the table, and that is going to be a copy of White Scar's Biker discarded. That is going to be an exhausted Urien Rakarth, and that is going to be a discarded copy of Tactical Squad Cardenas. So the Ichor Gauntlet allowed Urien there to double the effects of that Visions of Agony, and it's interesting that he would play that now. I guess he's trying to deprive his opponent of just any and all units to play Tactical Squad Cardenas. Nobody ever wants to see that. White Scar's Biker alongside a Warlord, alongside Colonel Straken, would be able to attack for not its printed 2, but actually a grand total of 5, plus 2 from the presence of a Warlord, plus 1 for being a soldier. And then if we see the, erroneously currently exhausted Ketachan Outpost add to it, that would be a potential swing of 7. And good luck shielding against that is Urien Rakarth. And because we've got that Ichor Gauntlet in play, there's no 3 shield icon card left, and that would mean the ultimate, immediate bloodying of that Warlord. But in any case, we've now got a copy of the Baleful Mandrake being played out to planets 1 and 2. It's a 3-cost unit, 3 attack, 2 hit points, and it's got the ranged keyword. Very interesting bit of synergy, very interesting card effect to see is we've got a copy of the Hypex Injector now affixed to the Baleful Mandrake at planet number 2, and that makes me think it's kind of curious in a way that we would see Urien use the Visions of Agony prior to the combat phase, just because at present he's going to be showing up at a planet exhausted, so he's not going to have the opportunity to basically, win a command struggle by default. He's going to be arriving with that Incubus Warrior also exhausted, so it's not going to be able to contribute command icons. Like if he were to show up at planet number 4, he wouldn't win any command at all because his Warlord and his unit would be exhausted, but that is not the case. Urien's going to show up at planet number 3, the Steal a Resource planet, and Straken instead is going to show up at planet number 2, and this is where things could get very interesting indeed, because that Baleful Mandrake does indeed have a Hypex Injector associated on it, and if we were to see another Torture event played during the command phase, after that unit attacks, it will immediately ready and be able to attack again, and that's why I was saying it was weird that Visions of Agony was played now. If it was saved until later, that would be an additional outgoing 3-value attack from that Baleful Mandrake, so it was probably worth it just to get rid of that Tax Squad Cardenas, just to get rid of that White Scars Biker, but in any case, let's see what else Cimadon has in his hand here. So, planet number 1, a battle erupts. The Baleful Mandrake quite easily kills the Interrogator Acolyte. That's going to be 2 cards drawn by Sebastian. Planet number 1 was going to be a card and a resource to the right there for Alexander. Colonel Straken, of course, wins the command struggle at planet number 2. Note that he generated a fresh Guardsman token for himself. That was 1 card, 1 resource for him. Planet number 3 is going to be 2 resources and a card there to the right for Cimadon, and planet number 4 is going to be nothing for anyone. But planet number 1 is going to be won by our Dark Eldar faction player. That's going to be, yet another red material type icon. It's going to be his first blue technology icon. But what do we want to see triggered in regard to planetary abilities? Looks like it's going to be Iridial. I was about to say it, and it seems as though that's what it was. So 3 points of damage are going to be removed from Urien Rakarth. Alexander's got to feel a hell of a lot better about having a 0 points of damage Urien. As soon as Urien's bloodied, I think he's a 2-5, and I can't quite recall if he keeps his abilities or not, but the cost for Urien Rakarth to play any torture event is decreased by 1, and the cost for him to play any non-torture event is increased by 1, so it's unlikely that we'll see a Warp Storm or Archon's Tear or anything like that in a Urien deck here, but this is where things get interesting. At planet number 2, the Baleful Mandrake takes a swing at Straken. That's going to be 2 points of damage successfully dealt because of the timely discard of a Muster the Guard. Okay, there we go. That's going to be a Power from Pain. Unfortunately, Urien's not going to be ready to double that effect. Wow, that is going to be a copy of Blood Angel's Veterans discarded to take care of that Power from Pain. I guess you have to sacrifice army units as opposed to just token or army units. That's going to ready the Baleful Mandrake, and that is going to be a bloodied copy of Colonel Straken, so I believe he is now a 2-5. All those soldiers and warriors are no longer going to get that attack bonus, and now that Baleful Mandrake is going to be an absolute menace, because if it manages to, deal out a couple blows during the range skirmish round to, Colonel Straken there, that could well cost Straken the game. There's 1 guardsman token left. I suppose Cimadon has run out of... Oh, maybe not. It seems as though he's having his opponent wait on activating that copy there of the Catachan Outpost. Do we have another torture event? Do we have a Rakarth's Experimentations? Yes, we do. That's going to be a 0-cost torture event. That's going to be name a card type. If your opponent can't discard a card of that type, that's going to be 1 point of damage to their Warlord. Whether or not Cimadon called events, or that was a noble deed discarded as shields, that's going to be a readied Baleful Mandrake. The Baleful Mandrake is going to take a swing. That's going to be a dead guardsman token. Note that the initiative token does happen to be in the possession of our Imperial Guard player, and at the end of the combat round, the Baleful Mandrake decides to retreat. But what's very interesting is that if Urien sends himself to Aatrox Prime during this following round, if Straken has the audacity to show up that planet, even though the Baleful Mandrake will be arriving alongside Urien exhausted, you're going to be able to play a torture event to ready the Baleful Mandrake, take a shot at Straken. Straken's hand has got to be very low on shield cards indeed, and then it readies, and you can keep playing torture events, you can keep dealing out damage to Straken, and if Urien is ready, you can replicate those Rakarth's Experimentations to potentially pile all the more points of damage upon Straken, and that spells disaster, potential disaster for that Warlord, but that's going to be Aatrox Prime 1 by our Imperial Guard Astra Militarum faction player. It's going to be 1 point of damage dealt out to all those units in the HQ, the Chaos Fanatics Hellion Gang, 2 copies of Baleful Mandrake, all kinds of damage tokens for days going on there. But Aatrox Prime is indeed won by our IG player. Urien Rakarth happened to win the battle at Ossus 4. That's going to be 1 resource stolen from the enemy. I happen to miss if there was an enemy unit sitting opposite Straken there. The actions are going pretty fast and furious, and I'm talking a whole hell of a lot for 1 human being. But we've got an HQ phase having gone by at this point. That's going to be 4 resources and 2 cards for each of our players. Look at that pile of resource tokens just ever increasing. Man, those Promethean mines can be useful if you get them out early, but if you're generating all those additional resources, you're generally going to want to have something to spend those on, and because Urien has been doing that whole, card choke game so effectively, we're definitely seeing a huge lack of cards. Cimadon last round deprived his opponent there of 2 army units. Those Blood Angels veterans were handily destroyed, so even though that Omega Zero command is a hell of a card, we really haven't seen it do too much. It's certainly generated, 4 or 5 guardsman tokens over the course of this match, but considering what it could do, things could definitely be looking far worse for Alexander. So, speaking of Alexander, note that he's got the initiative token. If he manages to win at planet number 1, that is his victory condition. We've got a gigantic discard pile for our Astra Militarum faction player. We've got a copy of, Hostile Environment Gear. That's the card on top of his deck. It's I believe, a 1-cost attachment with a shield icon. You can add 3 hit points to whatever unit you affix that to. For instance, a copy of the White Scars Biker that's now sitting at planet number 1. So I'll be very curious to see if Urien shows up at planet number 1 to try to win. His opponent has 1 planet type icon of each kind, even though there's a little bit of glare kind of hiding that from view. So we could see Urien play an extremely long game, or he could have the audacity to show up at planet number 1, and if he's able to do so, if he's got a bunch of torture events, he could definitely punish his opponent there, but that is a lot of opposition staring him down. The White Scars Bikers are going to be able to attack for 4. If there's a Warlord present at that planet, those guardsman tokens are going to be able to attack for 1. That Void Pirate, well, I guess it could provide a +1 card bonus, but that Hellion Gang on Cimadon's side of the table is going to be promoted, so its 3 command icons trump the Straken player's 2. We've got a couple copies of the Void Pirate by now at planet number 2. Ain't nobody give a damn about planet number 3. No command icon units there whatsoever. We've now got a copy of the Rockcrete Bunker in play, and we've also got a copy of the faction-specific army unit resource cost reducer. I don't quite remember what it's called. Imperial Outpost or something along those lines for our IG player, but he put that into play, and then he didn't play any army units, so that is his 1 limited card for the round, and I would imagine at this point in the game, investing a resource and a card all into 1 card, it kind of has the same weakness as does those Prometheum mines. Unless you play them really, really early, they're really not doing much for you, but Straken shows up at planet number 1. That's a very bold move by that Warlord. Urien instead shows up at planet number 3. I guess he's setting up all of his units for a victory at that planet. I guess his opponent is basically going to be forced to see this through. So planet number 1 is going to be 2 cards, 1 resource, and a guardsman token for Colonel Straken. Planet number 2 is going to be 2 cards, 2 resources for Urien Rakarth. Planet number 3 is going to be 1 card, and it's looking like that is going to be it for Urien Rakarth there to the right. So planet number 1 is going to be handily won by our Astra Militarum faction player. I can only imagine that he'll be able to, quite handily deal with that 2/2 Hellion Gang. He'll end up killing off that unit. Aatrox Prime is going to be able to take a shot at Ossus 4. He will potentially kill off the Incubus Warrior, both copies of that Void Pirate, but Urien Rakarth is going to be able to quite nicely set himself up at that final planet of the game. Note that Sebastian currently has 1 planet type icon of each color. Between planet number 1 and planet number 2, there's just 1 additional icon of each color, so if he gets all of them, then that means he's going to have 2 of each kind. By the time we get to the 7th, the 3rd, 7th, whatever final planet of the game, it's going to be whichever player ends up winning that will take home the game. It could be through any kind of icon if Colonel Straken ends up taking it, or instead, we could see Urien win through red material type icons, or perhaps a bigger problem is those 2 Baleful Mandrakes, one of which has a Hypex injector, are going to be sitting at planet number 1, and that could be a fantastic opportunity to force, if there's only 1 planet on the board, Colonel Straken has to show up at that planet, and he has to get killed. Power from Pain is played, Void Pirate is sacrificed, Urien Rakarth exhausts himself thanks to Ichor Gauntlet to replicate the effects of Power from Pain. What ended up being discarded? Why, the only other army unit in play. It's another copy of White Scars Bikers, so that is going to be 4 resources gone in 2 cards, all at the cost of, I believe, 1 resource and a card, so nice little combo there by Urien Rakarth. Urien is definitely putting in some work, and now let's see if, if we're going to have our Imperial Guard player bother to... Well, okay, so Aatrox Prime is going to result in a bunch of potentially dead units at planet number 2. I'm curious in regard to whether or not Urien is going to bother shielding those units. That's what I was going to say. But the initiative is going to be in the hands of Colonel Straken. Looks like 1 point of damage was dealt out to that copy of the Hellion Gang. The Hellion Gang takes a swing, deals a couple points of damage onto Colonel Straken, and holy hell, is he looking very susceptible to a ranged attack indeed. He's got a Rockcrete Bunker in play, which could strip off 1 point of damage, but 2 Baleful Mandrakes sitting at planet number 3. Or if Urien shows up someplace by himself the following round, which is probably impossible, presuming players are going to be playing units out to our current planet, well, soon to be planet number 1, He could, replicate Rakarth's experimentations, or in any case, he could end up corralled into the final planet, and then that's going to be a dead warlord, murder by baleful mandrakes. And if there's any way that I would want to die, it's probably not at the hands of a, torture-smitten, torture-philiac Dark Eldar, not to stereotype or generalize to their entire race. Wouldn't that make me look a bit of an ass? But in any case, we're about to see an HQ phase. That, of course, is going to mean 4 resources and 2 cards for each of our players. Looks as though we're kind of perhaps explaining this ranged keyword death trap that's assembled at our soon-to-be planet number 2, and that is looking like an absolute nightmare, so it's fantastic seeing Urien put in some absolute work. Looks as though since all of those units were exhausted, we actually come to the end of a combat round, and then, prior to that battle being won, that's going to be an action window opportunity, and we're going to see a copy of Rakarth's Experimentations played. Not sure what card type is going to be announced, but that's going to be a point of damage onto Colonel Straken there, and that's going to be the Ichor Gauntlet, allowing Urien Rakarth to exhaust himself and doubling that effect. And now, check it out, that's going to be a Colonel Straken with 1 hit point remaining. So are we going to see another copy of Rakarth's Experimentations? I believe we've only seen 2 copies of that, and any time that Straken takes as much as a single point of damage, then the game is going to be over for our Astra Militarum faction warlord. Note that Iridial is going to be 1, and I believe that was 1 point of damage stripped off of that unit, the Baleful Mandrake there that had the Hypex Injector, and I suppose that's a pretty reasonable target if you have to pull damage off of something, just because we could have seen a noble deed, like I believe, warrior or soldier trait unit sacrificed in order to deal damage equal to its printed attack value to a target unit. That could have potentially killed off the Baleful Mandrake prior to its opportunity to go absolutely, bananas during the combat phase and kill off Colonel Straken, but we'll have to see if Straken ends up making it to our, presumably final battle of the game here. The initiative token does happen to be in Straken's possession, but let's say he shows up at planet number 1. If there are a bunch of Dark Eldar units there, anything capable of dealing multiple points of damage, because that Rockcrete bunker can only shave off 1. Shield cards are only so effective, although we haven't seen the signature attachment Straken's cunning yet, so between that and the Rockcrete bunker, it would take an attack of 5 to guaranteed kill off our warlord there. So basically what I'm saying is Straken will have to waste a combat turn running away, and that completely sucks. Very odd choice. We see a copy of Hostile Environment gear put into play on the Void Pirate, so it's a 4 hit point unit, a very unconventional play there for sure. We've now got a copy of Rogue Trader. I'm almost wondering if that Hostile Environment gear is supposed to be a proxied copy of Promotion or something, or if Straken is just being cheeky and accepting his fate because perhaps he doesn't have any other, army units to put into play. A very interesting choice here. Looks like we see another copy of Baleful Mandrake played out to planet number 2, and I cannot imagine for the life of me why that's at planet number 2 as opposed to planet number 1. Seems like no matter what, you'd want to basically put Straken in a position where he's going to be outright destroyed, but Preemptive Barrage is indeed a thing, and since Straken's got the, initiative token, I guess we could see something like Straken get a Preemptive Barrage ranged attack, then Catachan Outpost, which isn't supposed to be exhausted right now, goddammit. That could be exhausted. Colonel Straken could attack for 4. That could be the death of the Baleful Mandrake, because you can't Archon's Terror a Warlord away. Even a 2 shield icon card wouldn't spare its existence, and again, Ichor Gauntlet, 3 shield card, only 1 copy in the deck, it's already in play. Chaos Fanatics are going to be played out at planet number 1 just for fun. Where is Straken going to go? Straken's going to show up at planet number 1. Urien is going to show up at planet number 1 as well. It's going to be 3 exhausted guardsman tokens showing up at that planet, and this is actually pretty funny because 2 command icons is greater than 1, therefore Urien Rakarth is going to win the command struggle at the first planet. That is not going to be a guardsman token generated, so that's going to be 2 resources for Cimadon, and it's going to be that +1 card bonus prevented by, the opponent's not going to be able to collect that, and of course, planet number 2 is going to be a card and a resource and an additional, a card and a resource, thanks to the Rogue Trader, won by by Urien. So, Urien is not going to be able to attack first, Straken's going to be able to attack first, but if Straken takes 1 point of damage, he is going to be dead, and that is going to be the game. So, is that Catachan outpost going to attack? Is Colonel Straken going to go out in a blaze of glory, or is he just going to allow himself to walk into that death trap the following turn? And speaking of death traps, it looks like these guardsman tokens aren't going to be too worse for wear once that, Chaos Fanatics are going to be able to attack for 1. Urien himself is going to be able to do something. I really have no idea what's going on there. Okay, so the Catachan outpost must have augmented the Void Pirate, and the Void Pirate killed off the Chaos Fanatic, so definitely color me confused, but very well. It looks as though Sebastian has accepted his fate. That's going to be Urien Rakarth taking a swing of 2. The Rockcrete Bunker could have dropped that to a single point of damage, but since our Imperial Guard player decided to play out that hostile environment gear as opposed to holding on to it for shields, that means that Straken was dead. Straken, of course, could have retreated, but then he very much would have been walking into a, an ambush full of punji sticks or something like that the following round. All those baleful mandrakes would have just filled Straken with bullets, and, maybe if his entire body happened to be built of mechanical parts, he'd have survived that just vicious onslaught of whatever it is that the Dark Eldar weapons fire, or whatever, ranged mechanic the mandrakes use to deliver damage. But, long story short, very well played by both of our players. Congratulations to Alexander Cimadon for managing to take this victory home, but of course very well played by Sebastian Freiding, and he definitely has my kudos for playing a very non-standard deck indeed. It's great seeing a copy of that Imperial Bunker, something you very rarely see play, and it is just a joy to see Prometheum mine. So that must have been something like 15 or so resource tokens that Straken ended the game with. Unfortunately, he was not able to pull that one out. Perhaps in the future, maybe that's the reason why people ally with orcs, use all kinds of ammo depots, Snakebite Thug, Evil Sun's Warbiker, because the White Scars Biker definitely didn't work out for him. But great to see Urien in play, great to see Urien up to all kinds of tricks. Definitely let me know in the comments what your own experiences have been with Straken or Urien. They're not our most competitive warlords by a long shot, but I've got a soft spot in my heart for both of these guys, and I love seeing them in play. I love, hearing stories about them, so let me know what some of your high and low, your best and worst play experiences have been with either of these warlords. But I very much hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly did, so thank you for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Or if you are already subscribed, I always encourage you to share this content, because the more individuals there are that end up exposed to Conquest, the more people may like what they see, they may give this game a try, join our LCG community, and all together we send an ever greater message to Fantasy Flight Games, yelling for them to keep supporting and developing this fantastic card game. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would very much encourage you to do so through Twitter or on Facebook, and if you'd ever like to send me in footage of your own, be it a tabletop game like the video you just watched, or you're instead recording your desktop and sending in an Octagon game, I would be absolutely honored to commentate and publish your matches to my channel, and give all the shoutouts in the world to your favorite local game store or a local gaming group. If you ever feel so inclined to support the Hive Tyrant, I would be honored and deeply appreciative if you were to make a donation to my Patreon. But in any case, thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.